Hello everybody, this is Mr. Laubach. Thank you for joining me. In this video, we are going to explore the foreign policy challenges faced by the United States from President George Washington through President Thomas Jefferson. So let's start with Washington. What were the main foreign policy challenges during Washington's presidency, which lasted from 1789 to 1797? He was a two-termer, and he, of course, was the nation's first president. Washington's presidency was marked by the struggle to maintain neutrality amid the conflict between Britain and France following the French Revolution. The young United States was heavily divided over whom to support. On one side, Jeffersonians favored the French, appreciating their revolutionary spirit, much like the United States had earlier. On the other side, the Federalists, led by Alexander Hamilton, leaned towards Britain due to economic ties. How did Washington handle this division? Washington issued the Proclamation of Neutrality in 1793, which asserted that the United States would remain impartial in the conflict. This was a pragmatic decision aimed at safeguarding the nation from becoming entangled in European wars that could threaten its fragile stability and economic health. What about Jay's Treaty, and how did it fit into Washington's foreign policy? The Jay Treaty of 1794, officially known as the Treaty of Amity, Commerce, and Navigation between the U.S. and Great Britain, was crucial in addressing ongoing tensions with Britain. British forces were still occupying forts in the Northwest Territory, or the upper Midwest of the present-day United States, and there were issues with British interference in American trade. The treaty, negotiated by Chief Justice John Jay, sought to resolve these issues by having Britain agree to vacate the forts and by establishing a framework for economic relations. However, the Jay Treaty did not address the issue of impressment, which was the practice of the British Navy forcibly recruiting American sailors into their service. Many Americans were deeply dissatisfied with the Jay Treaty because it failed to protect American sailors from being impressed by the British. This practice continued to strain U.S.-British relations and contributed to the causes of the War of 1812, when James Madison was president. While it was controversial and met with significant opposition, particularly from the Jeffersonian Republicans, who saw it as a betrayal of revolutionary ideals, it helped prevent war at the time with Britain and stabilize relations. Now remember, in Washington's farewell address, one of the things that he warned against was getting involved in foreign entanglements. He thought the young United States should focus only on itself and domestic issues as much as possible. Moving on to John Adams. He was a one-term president that served from 1797 to 1801. His presidency also faced significant foreign policy challenges, especially with France. The Quasi-War was an undeclared naval conflict between the United States and France that went from 1798 to 1800. It was precipitated by the XYZ Affair, where an American envoy to France were asked for bribes by French officials as a precondition for negotiations. This led to public outrage in the United States and a call for defensive measures. The XYZ Affair is famously associated with the slogan, "Millions for defense, but not 1 cent for tribute." This saying encapsulated the outrage and patriotic fervor in the United States in response to the demands for bribes and loans by French officials before they would begin negotiating with American diplomats. The phrase became a rallying cry, emphasizing that the U.S. was willing to spend large sums of money to defend its honor and sovereignty, but would not pay bribes to foreign powers. Now, the Quasi-War was not a major war, hence the name Quasi-War, and in the end, Adams resisted full-scale war by authorizing naval actions against French ships, bolstering the U.S. Navy and establishing a strong military stance. How did Adams balance the need for defense with the desire for a large-scale war, which remember the quasi-war was not large-scale. Adams faced significant pressure from both hawkish Federalists who wanted a more aggressive stance and Republicans who criticized increased military spending and potential encroachment on civil liberties. His signing of the Aliens and Seditions Act, aimed at curbing dissent and perceived threats, remains highly controversial to this day, as it was a significant infringement on freedom of speech. Ultimately, Adams prioritized diplomatic resolution, leading to the Convention of 1800, which ended the quasi-war and normalized relations with France. And then we have Thomas Jefferson, who was a president of the United States between 1801 and 1809. He became president in what was known as the Revolution of 1800, which was the first time in U.S. history that political power was transferred, and it occurred peacefully. Jefferson introduced a different foreign policy and had different challenges. How did the Louisiana Purchase come out, and what were its implications? The Louisiana Purchase in 1803 was a landmark event during Jefferson's presidency. France, under Napoleon, offered to sell the vast territory due to financial strains and failure to establish a Caribbean empire following the successful Haitian Revolution. Jefferson seized this opportunity despite his constitutional reservations about such an acquisition. The purchase doubled the size of the United States and secured American control of the Mississippi River, which was vital for trade. Jefferson also had a deal with the Barbary Pirates. What action did he take? The Barbary Pirates, based in northern Africa, think of where Libya is today, had long been extorting tribute from nations, including the U.S., to prevent attacks on their ships in the Mediterranean. Jefferson, who opposed paying these tributes, sent the U.S. Navy to confront the pirates, leading to the First Barbary War, which lasted from 1801 to 1805. This conflict was significant as it demonstrated America's willingness to protect its interests overseas and marked one of the first uses of naval power to address international issues. What about the Embargo Act of 1807? How did it reflect Jefferson's foreign policy challenges? The Embargo Act was a response to British and French interference with American merchant ships during the Napoleonic Wars. Both countries had imposed restrictions that hindered U.S. trade, and the British practice of impressment was particularly egregious. Jefferson's solution was to halt all exports aimed to pressure British and French economies. However, the Embargo Act backfired, causing significant economic hardships in the United States and proving deeply unpopular, as Britain and France were significant trade partners with the United States. Later on, the Non-Intercourse Act was passed by the Congress in 1809, replacing the Embargo Act of 1807. Here's a brief summary of the Non-Intercourse Act. The act aimed to modify the broad and economically damaging restrictions of the Embargo Act by specifically targeting trade restrictions against Britain and France, while allowing trade with other nations, attempting to pressure these two nations to respect American neutrality and maritime rights without crippling the U.S. economy. However, like the Embargo Act, the Non-Intercourse Act was largely ineffective in achieving its diplomatic goals. Neither Britain nor France made concessions regarding their interference with American shipping. The act was eventually replaced by Macon's Bill No. 2 in 1810, which sought a more flexible approach to trade and diplomacy. One of the big problems with the Embargo Act is it was difficult to enforce, as many American traders ignored it and traded with Britain and France anyway. So what are some big takeaways about foreign policy from the Washington administration through the Jefferson administration? One key lesson is the importance of pragmatism and flexibility. Washington's neutrality, Adams' diplomacy despite pressures for war, and Jefferson's bold Louisiana Purchase all underscore the need for adaptable strategies in foreign policy. They also highlight the young nation's struggle to balance idealism with practical concerns. These challenges also show how domestic politics and international relations are deeply intertwined. Each president had to navigate intense political divisions and public opinion while addressing external threats and opportunities. Their experiences laid the groundwork for the evolving American approach to foreign policy. So I hope you learned a little bit more about foreign policy in the early republic. Thanks for joining me and have a great rest of the day.